Hey everyone, we're here for another weekly live for Psychedelic League. Thanks for joining us, or thanks for watching us later. Um, we're here with Kristen Goedde from Trichome Analytics, and uh, we're excited to talk about testing and all things psilocybin. Um, Kristen has been doing testing for cannabis and many other compounds for a while now. She's active in um, I know you can speak to maybe if you want, the Home Grow initiative here in New Jersey. Very passionate and very knowledgeable. So we're really lucky to have her, and thank you for carving out an hour to talk with us. And so, yeah, if you'd like to make an intro, that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and talk about psilocybin, which I don't often get to speak about. Um, yeah, so my name is Kristen Goedde. I founded Trichome Analytical in about 2018. My background prior to starting Trichome Analytical is analytical third-party testing in environmental and industrial hygiene. So like air abatement, water testing, and all that good stuff. I started we started actually testing samples in July 2020 under the USDA Farm Bill prior to New Jersey allowing us to test for high THC cannabis. So throughout that process, we did obtain our DEA registration for handling Schedule 1 substances. We operated under the USDA program. We also have tested samples both from other states under our federal license ability to test from other research cultivators, as well as internationally on the high THC side. We started testing under the medical program prior to adult use in, I think it was 2021. At that point, prior to the ability for adult use sales in New Jersey. And then we started as the first lab license also in the adult use program once adult use sales were legalized. We have been testing routinely now for over 4 years. We've seen pretty much every sort of product type as it pertains to cannabis. We haven't yet tested psilocybin, but I have done some research on it, and I'm paying close attention to the bills in New Jersey because if given the opportunity, we would certainly like to add that on here. Under our DEA registration, the only way that we could potentially do that at this point would be to partner with a federal licensed cultivator for psilocybin mushrooms, which just there's not too many people doing that.
Got it. And definitely looking forward to expanding upon what you're currently doing and what you think might be done under the psilocybin bill. I just want to mention Sara, co-founder of Psychedelic League, is actually traveling. She's on her way to a retreat this weekend, and then she's presenting at a conference that's being put on in St. Louis, Missouri by Grunt Style, which is a veterans organization that offers veterans alternative healing opportunities. So I'm pinch hitting for for her and for both of us here, but she's gonna be I told her just that's super important, veterans and alternative healing. Like let me take over for today, and you get on the road. We'll be talking about combo and combo peptides, and I'll put a link up here actually if anyone wants to look into Grunt Style. There's a whole lot of veterans organizations that are focused on psychedelics, alternative healing, and so it's really great that she's able to support them. I'll throw a link in here for anyone who's interested, actually. And so Kristen, who are you currently doing work for through Trichome Analytical? Like who is your customer? Who is coming to you, and what are they looking for?
Sure, yeah. So we work with licensed cultivators and manufacturers in New Jersey under the CRC program, who are by regulation mandated to perform batch release testing on every batch or lot that is to go to market. So For example, for cultivation, once a harvest batch is complete, it's dried, it's cured, and it's ready to be packaged. A laboratory like Trichome would come in. We would take a representative sample of that product. We would then transport it back to the laboratory and provide testing. So that testing includes the state mandated panel, which is cannabinoid potency, terpene potency, as well as contaminants like heavy metals, pesticides, mycotoxins, and microbial contaminations, of which there are multiple analytes for each of those panels, and each of those analytes have their own set regulatory limit, which is generally based off of USP for like pharma regs to have that passed and be released for market and assured that it's safe for consumption and dosed correctly and labeled correctly.
So safety, dosing, and labeling. I mean, those are like three seemingly core tenets of any regulated market, right? Whether it's cannabis or psychedelics, because you want to make sure that what you're getting is not contaminated with anything. What are some of the contaminants that what are like some of the main things that you're looking for, or what are you seeing as and maybe you could talk also about psilocybin if you want to talk at the same time about like what are the main things you're looking for, and why would testing, even if it weren't like mandated that testing happens, what should people be looking for?
Sure, yeah. Well, I think testing for potency is extremely important, whether it's cannabis or possibly even more important on psilocybin for accurate dosing of the product during the administration session. So, like cannabis can range anywhere from 10% THC to 30% THC in the high potency varieties. But as far as the effects of THC, I mean, you can more easily, I think, moderate that during your smoking session or ingesting edibles or anything like that. With psilocybin, the active dose is so low that you need, but it needs to be within a certain range to elicit like the full holistic benefits and the hallucinogenic effects that are anticipated during a session. So with something like psilocybin mushrooms, what we would be looking for is not just psilocybin, but actually more like a total psilocybin or psilocin kind of percentage. So psilocybin is actually not bioactive. That's not what elicits the hallucinogenic effects of psilocybin mushrooms. It's converted in the body to psilocin, so that's the active compound. So similar to like how THCA converts into delta 9 THC, and delta 9 THC is the compound that gets you high in cannabis. The psilocybin will convert into psilocin, which is what binds to stimulates the serotonin receptors and elicits those hallucinogenic effects needed during the administration session. And similar to how you lose some weight when the compounds change for THCA into delta 9 THC, that's why it's converted as like a total THC, and it's a formula. So you take into consideration that weight difference. There's also a consideration for psilocybin into psilocin. So there's a conversion factor that is included in that. So you get your total like psilocin result, and that would be what you're basing your dosing on. So if you have like just like whole mushrooms that you're using, whether it's ground and homogenized together to get like a even distribution, I mean that can range from 0.1% to 2%. So you could have a lot of variation within that, and you want to make sure you're administering the proper dose to the patient, so that they're getting the intended effects without like having more than they want. So that's why I think like especially potency testing and psilocybin administration is extremely important because of that variation. And that variation is not only between like phenotypes within the species, but also can be different within each phenotype between like the stems and the caps, where some caps are higher percentage, some stems are higher percentage. It just really depends on like the mushrooms that you're growing. So having that all like homogenized together or extracted into a solution that is then administered is the preferred way to dose in like a medical setting.
And I understand, and I know you're aware. I know we've spoke before we jumped on. I know you're aware of like the Oregon regs, and um, they're what's the they're dosing in psilocin, right? They're dosing in is it milligrams of psilocin? Yeah.
Yeah, so generally, like a laboratory report would have the milligrams per gram or the weight percent of the amount of the active compounds in the either. I know in Oregon they do allow the whole like whole mushrooms, but I think what is more common is the homogenized mushroom material because that allows for more proper dosing and or extracts. So under the Oregon program, they do mandate, similar to how New Jersey mandates like batch release testing. They do mandate batch release testing for psilocybin mushrooms, in that every batch that is produced needs to be tested at minimal for the potency of the psilocin for dosing purposes. They also do require speciation tests on the first harvest batch of each year of that variety that's being cultivated, to just confirm that it's the species that's mandated within that program. And beyond that, and I think a little different than what we see in cannabis testing, which I really think is good and effective. They also take a duplicate for every harvest batch. So you have to take a certain amount for your initial sample, and then you take a duplicate sample from that, and then you test both of those separately for potency. And that potency needs to be within 20% RSD to make sure that it's homogeneous throughout that entire batch. And that's for the I think all products, but it's specifically a concern for that like whole mushroom material.
And this testing is mandated. Like, do you think it seems like through this process of regulation, it does increase like education around what you're accessing, right? Because I think there's a lot of mystery around psychedelics, and I think maybe perhaps that's also just like any other product. I mean, people's bodies react differently with them, and getting it down to more of a science might kind of. What's your thought about like, the benefits or the drawbacks of testing, or the requiring testing? Because there are some, like in Colorado, there is essentially home grow. I know that's an issue that was originally that's something that was originally in the bill here in New Jersey, the psilocybin bill, and that's been amended out. Um, I mean, like, really, what are some of the biggest upsides and downsides you think about a regulated process that's making you test psilocybin?
Well, yeah, and I think as far as like medical treatment centers where it's done under like an administration session, that definitely needs to be dosed correctly and repeatable, right? So I think that is extremely important for those medical operators that are licensed to administer to patients, and to have that consistency in their administration sessions in between patients and with the same patient again and again, so they can monitor whether to increase their dose or decrease it depending on the person. Whereas like something like if so there's a couple things I think I would want to talk about on this topic. So as if homegrow was allowed for mushrooms in New Jersey, or for even cannabis in New Jersey, because we still don't see that here, testing wouldn't be mandated for that. I mean, you can get testing under NJAC 1730. Any consumer can go to a licensed laboratory and get testing. And I think it should be the same under for psilocybin, so that like your dosage. You also can get like your speciation test, make sure like the spores that you're getting are the spores that you ordered, and that nothing else is kind of growing in there, which could potentially be like dangerous. or just not have the intended effect. Like I see now on the gray market, like where you see like magic mushroom chocolates and things like that, and basically alluding to the fact that okay, like these are psilocybin chocolates, but a lot of the cases they aren't. There are other mushrooms that aren't scheduled, like the amanita mushrooms, which do elicit hallucinogenic effects, but it also kind of makes you sick. But they just like market it as like, oh, this is magic mushrooms. I can see where testing should play a role in that, so that consumers know what they're consuming. Just like with the synthetic cannabinoid market, delta 8, THCO, HHC, all that stuff. A lot of it's just like mislabeled, right? Like it's going to say HHC, it's going to put all these acronyms on there, and it's just like delta 8 THC. And it's just like a marketing scheme. And I have seen legitimate HHC, THCOP, and THC products, but a lot of it's just like, a brand just wants to sell 5 times as much, so they just put 5 different boxes on the same thing. So I think testing, as far as like the gray market on that, is important, so that like you don't get turned off by that product before you can afford maybe to take it in a medical setting. Like amanita mushrooms will make you sick more so than psilocybin mushrooms. So I do think testing should play a role, not only within like a regulated medical administration market, but also just to raise awareness to consumers about what they're actually consuming, just like as it is with the synthetic cannabinoid market.
Yeah, and I know I know that you have your own position on home grow. Like what really, and let's talk for a second about home grow, but specifically mushrooms. Like what are the risks to your knowledge of growing mushrooms and not getting tested? Is the testing that's mandated beyond the dosage? Is the safety a real concern, or is that less of a concern? And maybe if you had to prioritize like what you're getting out of the testing process, repeatability you mentioned is a big thing in a kind of more controlled environment. Is how concerning is the testing, of mushrooms? Is it, you might have something like a contaminant, but how dangerous could that contaminant likely be? Do you see kind of what I'm saying? I'm trying
Right.
to
Yeah.
gauge on like on the safety issue, and I think it's just an interesting talking point. It'd be interesting to say, really testing is important for safety, but in general, mushrooms contaminants are only so dangerous, or maybe they really can be. I just don't know. I don't know if there's an awareness of what that range really could be, or what you're
Right.
seeing.
Well, I
Yeah.
would think that it would be like the same risk as growing any type of mushroom, where you can, if you're doing it outside of a sterile environment, you can introduce other microbial contamination that will either kill off your mushrooms or take over, and then what you're growing is no longer psilocybin. But I don't think it's like dangerous in that like one wrong step and you're growing poison or anything like that. I think it's more like just similar to risks of growing tomatoes in your garden. I mean, you could have E. coli in there, you can get sick. Like it's especially when it comes to like ingestible products. Like we see, limits are higher for those. Your body handles it more. I think the main one of the main reasons why testing cannabis is so important is the inhalation aspect and the fact that it's outside of your control for the cultivation of it. Are there pesticides being used on it? Are there heavy metals that are being taken up by the plant through the soil that would be more harmful when you're igniting it, and where those compounds could potentially turn into other more harmful compounds and inhaling it. So that's definitely a critical reason why batch release testing is performed on cannabis and other products within the cannabis program. But as far as like ingestible products, we see in New Jersey we don't test for pesticides in ingestible products. We see higher limits for certain types of like metals. And we have like a different microbial panel. We're not testing for general bacteria and a lot of like the quality indicator tests. So because your body can handle more of that. I mean, you test something off the shelf in the grocery store, you're going to get bacteria, you're going to get mold, but it's there. It's just about what's reasonable and what would actually get you sick. So I know in Oregon, the only testing that is required for every batch is the potency test, and on just like normal mushrooms and homogenized mushrooms, and then they do require solvent testing if a solvent was used for the extraction process. I think they allow both methanol and acetic acid for that. So if you do use solvents to extract, you do have to get it tested for solvents. And they put in there that upon request by the department, you can also be mandated to or requested to test for pesticide, mycotoxin, microbial contamination, like general E. coli, and like metals. But that's not something that's done in every batch, and I don't know how often it is requested by the state.
So based on that, it seems like the main concern for home grow, I mean, just generally, isn't really. It's like you said, it's analogous to growing anything at home, right? You're going to perhaps grow it in something that may not be like sterile or whatever the concern might be, but I guess the takeaway is the risk isn't any there's no specific risk to psilocybin mushrooms that like lives over and above any other kind of mushroom or crop you might be growing at home. Right?
Yeah, I think you have the same concerns over any type of mushrooms that you're growing. And like there are certain methods that when you're growing mushrooms that you have to use, so you have to be very sterile. But that's, like I said, the same with any type of mushrooms. I haven't grown any type of mushroom, so I don't really know too much on the cultivation aspect, but I know there's experts in those fields that would definitely be able to tell you that. I think that the problems are the same regardless of the type of mushroom.
Mm-hmm. And so, what would be what would you think? What's your sense of the current bill? And I don't know if you've gotten a chance to review it. Do you think there would be would Trichome take on testing for psilocybin, and would there be like is it a market that you would be looking to get into, and what's your thought about that?
Yeah, it's definitely a market we're already like looking to enter. If it's possible for us to enter it on the federal level, we would. And that's something that we look into partnerships with federal operators to have a reason and a source for this material. But like under the DEA registration, everything's very strict. So you have to have all of the proper documentation to get anything into the laboratory. So we wouldn't be able to just pick something off a gas station shelf that says magic mushrooms and be able to start testing that. We would have to go through the proper process to do so. So we are exploring avenues to be able to do that prior to the state legalization. Now, if the state does legalize and it does mandate testing, then we would definitely be looking into bringing that testing on as a separate service from our cannabis testing. Under this current bill, I did review it since the kind of rewrite back a few months ago. They still do provide, there's still a mandate for testing, especially regarding the potency of the products for dosing. And but it basically directs the CRC and Department of Agriculture, like the new board that's created for the psilocybin, plus the CRC and Department of Agriculture, to come up with the testing regulations, which may include microbial contamination, pesticides, other contaminants, solvents, psilocybin concentration, and procedures for batch sizing and sampling for psilocybin products, which is also like a very important aspect of testing in general. If you don't have a representative sample, you're not going to get the results that are effective for any consumer or physician administrating the product. So one of the things I think Oregon did very well is their sampling protocols, where they do limit the batch size to 1,000 grams or 1 kilo. And they do mandate different sample increments depending on the product type. So if it's like homogenized mushrooms, you don't have to take as much to get a representative sample. But if you're doing the whole mushroom sampling, you do have to take a little bit more to get that representative sample. And they go through. They have like it's like at least a 15-page like SOP instructing how to take a representative sample and what to do for all of the sampling there. So hopefully, New Jersey would come up with something similar. Right now, under the cannabis program, the guidance isn't as detailed as some other states are. So that could lead to some variation between laboratories and some differences with how the laboratories obtain a sample and whether or not that's representative of the entire batch is kind of up to the lab to determine. So, like I said, things vary between labs in New Jersey.
Yeah, I want, I wanted to flash here. I wanted to, and I can't get the whole Trichome analytical in it, but here's Trichome Analytical because you have a really great website, and I know you have like, I'm looking at it right now. You can order testing directly there. Um, yeah, is there any? I had a couple thoughts. One is there an opportunity through Trichome to do like reporting and data about I guess anything regarding cannabis, or perhaps maybe if psilocybin comes online, about psilocybin, about I, I don't know, averages of potency or things like that. Um, and then my second question is going to be, do you have any suggestions? Do you envision making any suggestions along the way if the psilocybin bill does come online? If they have uh, a period where they're making rules and recommendations, like what would be your recommendations, if any, specifically for best practices and psilocybin testing?
Sure, yeah. So, as to the first point on that, we are an independent third-party laboratory, so all of our results are, directly to our clients. However, under the New Jersey cannabis program, everything is accessible to consumers through the NJCRC. So they have to have access to the data. And I do know that just last week there was or maybe it was earlier this week, there was a data dump for not only New Jersey, but I think 16 other states where through obtained through FOIA requests, all the state testing data was released, which I believe I reposted on LinkedIn. So you could check my LinkedIn for that link. But so that would be one way to get all the state data. Independent laboratories would not be able to share that data, but it is accessible through the CRC or any state program. And there's some definitely interesting trends in the data that I saw that was released between states and within states, between laboratories and all of that. So that's a good place to go to if you're curious about percentages. It's a lot of data to sift through, but it has all the total THCs issued by all the laboratories for the last 2.5 years. So a lot of data to go through.
Interesting.
And then for your second question regarding recommendations to the state on testing requirements, I would definitely focus on the need for the potency testing to be performed for accurate dosing, and that testing needs to be performed by independent third-party operators, and it needs to be performed on every batch or lot. One of the mistakes I think that was made in the medical program upon launch was that while testing was required, it was only required on the first harvest batch of each cultivar. So there were some cultivars that were only tested once per every 5-6 years, and that potency changes over time. Not only over time, but batch to batch, even plant to plant, bud to bud. You test one bud from one plant versus another bud from another plant. It's just not going to be the same. And the same thing is in effect with mushrooms. So I think testing every kilo, like Oregon is doing, makes sense to get that proper dosing. Something I would also recommend, or I guess at least advise on, is that I understand a lot of states kind of pull regulations from other states, or now with psilocybin, they're going to pull regulations from cannabis. I would just caution against that, because there are, there are concerns with cannabis that may not be concerned with psilocybin, especially as it pertains to testing. Like, for example, we have a total yeast and mold test for cannabis that has a limit of 100,000 CFU per gram. But you can't test fungus for yeast and mold; like, it'll fail. So I think it's just those like nuances that they'll need to develop in collaboration with scientific experts to make sure that they're not setting up their program for failure and testing for things that don't make any sense. So I guess I would just caution against pulling everything from cannabis, because it's not the same. They're completely.
You do see that, like the legislation as written has a lot of the CREMA Act in it, and you can see. I mean, it just makes sense. You don't need to always reinvent the wheel, but I guess in that instance, you're going to need to update it with regard to psilocybin. Hopefully we'll be at a point where there'll be, either we could have you on the 15-member psilocybin board advising. Seems like that would be a good idea.
Yeah, that would be great. I'm open for
it. or at least submitting suggestions. So what else? What are some interesting facts about any other things that we haven't thought about when it comes to dosing or testing that we haven't already touched upon? Because quite frankly, it is like I think I understand one of the most interesting parts of this is the ability for service centers to now do dosing in such a different way. And what's your understanding of you're like potential psilocin, right? I think you got like potential THC. Is that the right terminology? Where it's like, what's that terminology I'm trying to remember there?
Right. Yeah. So like total psilocin or total psilocybin and psilocin, something like that, to sort of that kind of mirrors the total THC that we report, and that's mandated to put on packaging. But I know in this legislation, it only really accounts for psilocybin. I don't think I see psilocin, especially in at least the testing section, that's where I control F, and I only read that part sometimes. So I think they'd have to just ensure that they know what they should be looking for. They should be testing not only for psilocybin but for psilocin, and that total psilocybin should be using that conversion factor of 0.719, just the weight conversion from psilocybin to psilocin, to get that accurate, consistent result like we do for total THC and cannabis. So that would be one of the more nuanced things that they should probably take note of. And then, as far as mandating other testing, I would say they should really think about the concerns specifically with mushrooms and not just take it from cannabis. So like similar to other plants, like cannabis, mushrooms do uptake more heavy metals from the soil. So maybe metals would be a concern, but are pesticides a concern? Like, you're not growing mushrooms outdoors, hopefully, especially psilocybin mushrooms. You're doing it in a controlled environment. It's a much smaller footprint than, an indoor cultivation environment. Should pesticides be required on every batch? Like, I think Oregon did it correctly in that when requested by the state. Maybe, taking that sort of approach would be wise to not limit the market in the beginning, particularly, and not overburden the operators with testing that doesn't matter. Like, make sure the testing is specific for the product that you're testing for. So those would be my recommendations. Maybe testing for, this is again more of a concern on the, I guess, grain market, but making sure that, if there was, I guess, eventually ever a recreational psilocybin market, which I really don't see happening, making sure, to test for other compounds that would be present in Amanita mushrooms, or, DMT, the synthetic DMTs that are making it into those products that are being then sold to psilocybin, and it's not psilocybin. So
Yeah, I mean, there is a big, as you've been seeing, perhaps like a crackdown, like nationwide in New Jersey on Delta 8 and these other compounds. I don't think they're calling for testing of them as much as just banning them or something like that, it seems. Um, so one of the interesting things I think with testing and dosing is that it's like it's a bioavailability, right? So if there's just psilocin available in whatever form, right, that's going to be much more quickly bioavailable. And I think, then I think the more education there is about the effects of psilocin, which is ultimately where the end goal, where you get psilocybin and then it's converted to psilocin, and then that's when the effects when the effects really happen. That's why there's a delay, right? And you hear anecdotal stories of people who have really long delay, and the effects don't take place for 6 hours once they've already left and gone home from their session. Um, so it's your understanding that there's psilocin that exists in psilocybin mushrooms separate and apart from the psilocybin, or is that how that's showing up?
On the tests that I've seen and the reports that I've read, there's like trace amounts, just like how there's delta 9 in cannabis trace amounts. Now, whether that is actually in the mushroom or it's created during maybe the preparation process that research scientist used, but it does seem to be that there is some psilocin, small amounts. So psilocin will degrade quickly outside of the body. So it's not like it's going to be mainly psilocin or anything like that, but there may be traces of it, and it should be accounted for on a test, regardless of how that is produced. I think what I was seeing, I mean, it might have been around like 0.1%, like very low.
Very low.
Still enough for the effects, especially given that the psilocybin, you're not going to see over 2% psilocybin in the mushroom. So even that 0.1% could play a role in the lower dose mushrooms. So I think as far as testing goes, that needs to be a necessary compound on the panel, and then your total number needs to include that, and include the conversion of psilocybin into psilocin.
And so the total number would be, and you said 0.79 is how you convert. How does that conversion work? 0.79.
Yeah, it's 0.719 for psilocybin into psilocin, and that's just like the weight conversion, like what's lost through that. I think it's I don't know specifically the process. I think it's like an enzyme process. It's called like dephosphorylate. Like it's dephosphorylated into the active psilocin compound, and that has, it just loses some of the mass of the compound. So
you find psilocybin, and then through the process of it being converted into psilocin, it loses effectively 30% of its mass or something like that, I guess. And then you're left with 70% remaining psilocin, which is the active. So then if you have a percentage of psilocin in a sample, it's just gonna stand as a one, whatever it's gonna be, whatever its weight is, right? And then but you're not seeing, I'm not sure if you're seeing or aware of like products that are larger quantities of psilocin, and I don't even know if psilocin is stable to exist.
Right. I think it's not produced synthetically much in especially studies and things like when there are studies that are producing psilocybin synthetically, they usually produce psilocybin because it's more stable than psilocin. So you don't see high quantities of psilocin because it isn't very stable. I guess the preferred compound even for the synthetically produced compounds is psilocybin because it will just convert in your body. I understand like the concerns about like the bioavailability and like the differences between people and the differences in onset. Maybe their process is just slower than others. So but yeah, I'm not too familiar on that side. If there's a stable conversion that can be done outside of the body, and then
Great. I just looked over at the chat and apologize for seeing these late. There is somebody put something in here about, I'm not exactly sure. I haven't gone to the article yet, but so data on sequencing these mushroom species. So thank you for sharing, because we can use all the data we can get. And there's another, I guess this is Brendan. He said this is a link to the whole Genome Atlas project. Let's see this one. Not sure how to get to that link. I guess you'd have to maybe you could search F1000 research. I'll do the same once we're done. But there is a lot going on. I know that it's such an emerging area, but there's a lot to learn. Thanks for sharing, Brendan. Yeah, and quite frankly, I'm such a layman that I'm even having trouble forming coherent questions. But luckily, we have some comments coming through to keep the conversation going. So let's see what Will says. It gets cut off. What factors affect conversion of psilocybin to psilocin? Is it an action by digestion or breakdown of the cellin exposure to oxidation? Example, sort of like allicin conversion in garlic, and that's probably not even the right way to say. Kristen, is any of this ringing a bell? Are they barking up the wrong tree?
I honestly, I'm not sure about like the enzymatic like process use. Beyond that, it's called like it's basically dephosphorylated in the body, which I think is like the enzyme interaction with it. And I'm not a doctor or anything, so I don't know that. But
yeah, we're gonna have to pull somebody in now to talk about the physiological process too.
Yeah, that would be
We'll have to have you back, and then you could talk. We can.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that as well, about the process inside the body.
Somebody else said here, we also agree with Kristen that specialization is a good idea, since cubensis can be easily confused for other mushrooms in the Psilocybe genus, some of which can be toxic to humans. So in particular, the wood lover Psilocybe causes acute paralysis. That's not good upon ingestion. So specialization is a great point. So it's,
yeah, I think that speciation is definitely important, especially.
Oh, sorry, speciation.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you guys can walk me through this.
Yeah, especially when it is something that's going into like a market, or I mean, a lot of people like forage mushrooms, and if it's easily confused visually, that's something that, I mean, I know a lot of foragers are like experts in identifying exactly what mushrooms they're looking for, but if it's, I wouldn't recommend it to someone that's not an expert and that's not willing to take that risk personally.
Yeah.
Or, to forage and then give it to someone else. You just, try it yourself.
I mean, I give so much credit to mycologists or anybody who's an amateur mycologist going out there picking and finding mushrooms and ingesting them. I think you have to have a lot of experience under your belt before you start doing that. So yeah, thanks for the comments. It's really super helpful. Please, keep them coming. I wish I could get the entire thing in the screen here. So, please feel free to reach out to Kristen and or Psychedelic League with any suggestions about what information you'd like or anybody you'd like to have on. If anyone listening, and thanks, Will, for the comment about confirming that it'd be great to have somebody come on talk about the physiological effects. If you have any suggestions, we have these weekly calls, and we just learn so much every time. In the last couple of weeks, we've had mushroom growers on. We've had just like a ton of experts, and every time we walk away, we have service center operators last week, I believe. We walk away with information every time. I feel like it just like a snowball effect. I can kind of keep pulling together more and more information and hopefully share it with people and be informative, and then we can all kind of keep educating ourselves. Yeah, please reach out to Kristen. I'll put a LinkedIn link here.
Well,
Kristen, is
I
there
do
anything else?
have
Yeah.
I do have like a question for you, because I know like during the summer there's not that much movement on the legislative side. But have you heard anything since? I know this went through committee a few months ago with the amendments, but it didn't go up for the voting session at the end of the last session. So, have you heard anything on updates to the existing bill? If there are other considerations that may be taken into the final bill, or like what we should be paying attention to, I guess, as the session resumes this month?
So there's this psilocybin bill coalition that's brought together by the people who are kind of pushing the bill forward, and we have a meeting coming up soon. I haven't heard any movement. We're trying to get someone on, who's closer to the inside to come on and speak in the coming weeks. I haven't heard any changes. I think everybody's been on vacation, is what I've heard.
Yeah.
I think the amendments that were, last with the assembly are just the furthest that we got. We did a breakdown on LinkedIn of those amendments. It's Psychedelic League's LinkedIn page. You can see there's some slides we did recently that we'll keep updating. Yeah, I mean, was there something in there that you particularly wanted to hear more about or to have changed? I mean, we know that the decriminalization home grow is just it's not going that direction, which is not a surprise, really. But
Right. I mean, yeah, I think, with the initial bill including a lot more of the social equity provisions, and with not only the decriminalization of home cultivation, but also expungements for past offenses on psilocybin. I do think that if you're legalizing something for medicinal use and for something for businesses to produce and sell, that other people shouldn't be, arrested for it at the same time. So I think that we had a lot of missteps under the medical cannabis program and under the adult use cannabis program as it relates to social equity and ensuring that the arrests stop, or records are, I know there's expungement in cannabis, but I do think that needs to be mirrored in psilocybin, and for any legalization of a formerly illegal substance. People shouldn't continue to be punished by those regulations while allowing a legal market for where people can make a lot of money. I do think that needs to be taken into consideration. The other main part that I thought would potentially be a slightly easier ask, because I understand the reasons behind keeping this illegal, I guess. From their perspective, I don't agree with it, but I understand what they're doing. The ability for home administration is critical for especially end-of-life care, and that was removed from the previous bill, where that would still be a trained therapist in administration for psilocybin. It would just be done at the home, and a lot of people can't leave their homes, especially those in those end-of-life situations. And to require them to go to like not only one, but I think it's 3 sessions now at a facility to obtain one administration round, is just unachievable for a lot of people with mobility issues. So having that ability for the licensed and trained administrator to administer it in a home setting is I think critical to help a lot of people.
That's a pretty hot topic, because you might be aware of Catherine Tucker's work. She's based on the West Coast, but end of life care is her, it's her major push. And yeah, and I think it's an access issue. So really, my understanding is kind of what's going on with the legislation is they're just trying to get it done. I don't know how much they're taking into consideration some of these issues, but the two that you mentioned, which is expungements, which makes sense, especially there was a downgraded psilocybin possession in 2021 act that downgraded the penalties. Um, and yeah, so uh, it, I think people should, get involved with if they're passionate about the legislation, they should get involved and try to voice it. Where do you voice it is another question, right? And how you go about that. Uh, Again, there is this coalition. However, and I think people who are really passionate should voice through that coalition, or take their own. You can look at who the bill sponsors are, and you can certainly reach out to them. I don't think it's a huge ask to have. It doesn't seem administratively that much of an add-on to have home access, and certainly not the expungements. It's not a huge ask. I think it's certainly doable. So hopefully, Kristen, hopefully that's your come on the coalition and push that one.
Yeah, yeah, I'll definitely be voicing my opinion
I
to
know
the
you. I
state.
know you have no problem with that, which is great.
Yeah.
But we'll have you come and do it like regularly.
Yeah, yeah, no, I
Um,
would totally be open to that.
and you're going to be
I
in
think it's
Newtown.
important to get it. Like, I understand the need to get it done. But when people are writing and pushing things in the as like a senator, and they just want to get it done, it's like, but it needs to be done right, because you see what has happened in the medical cannabis program, and it's completely decimated now in New Jersey, and like, just this bill mirrors the medical cannabis program bill, and it kind of sets it up for the same issues in a lot of ways. So I do hope they learn from the past, and not only make progress on the initial psilocybin legalization for medical use, but also revisit the need for medical home cultivation for cannabis. This bill has 8 sponsors and co-sponsors, and it's about to be 9. We did get another co-sponsor on there. That one is S1393 for the medical home grow. So we're almost up to 10 sponsors, and
That's great.
it's still not being able to be heard. I will be talking more on that bill actually this weekend at NECAN. We have a panel on Saturday at 1. So if anyone's going to NECAN, tune into that panel to learn more.
That's great. Well, congrats on all that work. I know you've been working on this for a long time. Amazing to keep it moving like this. And perhaps, timing is a lot of it, it seems, in politics. So now that we're getting into this new session, hopefully things can move along.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Agreed.
definitely keep us posted. And thank you for jumping on. Really pleasure talking with you. I'll be down at NECAN tomorrow morning speaking about psychedelics with a panel with some colleagues. I think it's at 11 or so.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be there.
Cool.
I'll listen in.
Great. We'll see you. We'll see you down there then. See you in Atlantic City. And there's one more chat that I'm seeing here. Great conversation. Lots of info. Thanks,
Thank
Clint.
you.
Appreciate that. Looking forward to the next one. See y'all later.